Welcome to LexTalks, Legal Topics Simplified,
hmm
a space where, well, we like to simplify legal concepts, especially for you, Indian law students. We know you're out there. Today, we're diving deep
Yeah, a deep dive.
into something you've definitely come across in your property law studies,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
the Doctrine of Priority and transfer of Lis Pendens. Big words.
Yeah, can be intimidating, right?
But don't worry, we've got a whole stack of research on this,
We do.
and we're going to break it down, make it easy to understand. So let's start with this Doctrine of Priority. Seems simple enough.
Yeah, I guess on the surface it is. It's kind of like that first come, first served idea.
Right, like you get there first, you're in line, you win.
Exactly. Section 48 of the Transfer of Property Act of 1822, actually it spells that out, that first in time, first in right thing. Basically, the person who gets an interest in a property first.
They have a stronger claim.
Stronger legal claim, yeah, than someone who comes along later.
So if I try to sell you a piece of land, and then I turn around and try to sell that same land to someone else,
Uh-huh.
you'd be in the right because you're the first buyer.
You got it. Your interest, it would win out. But of course, property law, it's not always so cut and dry.
Yeah, there's always a but, right?
Always a but. There are exceptions, nuances, And that's what makes it, well, pretty interesting to study.
Okay. So where does Lis Pendens fit into all of this? I know it means suit pending,
Right.
but how does a pending lawsuit actually impact property ownership? And what about Section 52 of the Transfer of Property Act?
Great questions. Okay, picture this. Two parties are fighting over a property in court.
Okay.
Maybe they're siblings arguing over an inheritance or something.
Right.
Now, while that case is going on, one of them decides to sell the property
Uh-oh.
to a third party who has no idea about the dispute.
Oh, that sounds messy.
It can be a real mess, and that's exactly where Lis Pendens steps in. Think of it like a legal pause button.
A pause button?
Yeah. On any attempt to sell or deal with that property while the lawsuit's happening.
So even if that third party, they think they're buying it legally, their purchase could be, like, voided.
Totally. If the court ends up siding with the other sibling.
Wow.
See, Lis Pendens, it's all about protecting that legal process, making sure the court's decision actually means something. The rightful owner, whoever the court decides that is,
Right.
they should get the property, no matter what kind of sneaky transfers happen during the lawsuit.
That makes sense. I mean, what's the point of even going to court
Right.
if someone can just sell the property and dodge the whole judgment?
Exactly. So, yeah, there are certain conditions.
I was going to say there have to be rules for when Lis Pendens actually applies, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's not just any property dispute.
Okay.
There are 6 essential requirements. You need all 6 for the doctrine to apply.
6. Okay. I'm going to need a mnemonic device or something to remember all that.
All right. How about SIDCAN? Think SIDCAN.
SIDCAN. Okay, I'm listening.
All right. The C stands for contentious suit. So there's got to be a real legal battle going on.
Right, not just like a family squabble.
No. A genuine fight over the property. Then that's for immovable property.
Immovable meaning like
We're talking land, buildings, anything that's basically fixed in place.
not your car.
Right, not your car, not jewelry.
Okay, so a real fight over something attached to the ground.
Exactly. Now, D is for direct and specific. The lawsuit has to be about the specific property that's being transferred.
So if the lawsuit's about, let's say, a house, it only applies to that house.
Exactly. Not any other property they might own. It's very targeted.
Gotcha. So not just a free-for-all on all their assets, just the one in question.
Precisely. And then we have another C. This time it's for court of competent jurisdiction. The case has to be in a court that actually has the power to make decisions about that property.
Right, it can't just be any random court.
Not just any court, no. And then A is for effect on rights. The transfer has to actually have the potential to affect the other people involved in the case.
Right, so if I sell my car, that doesn't affect the lawsuit about the house.
Exactly. And finally, N for non-collusive suit.
Non-collusive means...
And can't be a fake lawsuit.
okay.
Cooked up just to benefit someone unfairly. It's got to be a real legal dispute.
All right, CID can. I think I can remember that.
That's the key.
So how did this whole Lis Pendens thing even come about? Was there like a big case that started it all?
There is. It goes way back to 1857, the case of Bellamy v. Sabine. That really laid the groundwork for Lis Pendens.
Wow, 1857. That's going way back.
Yeah.
So what was it about Bellamy v. Sabine that made it so important?
Well, the judge in that case, Justice Turner,
Hmm.
he said something that perfectly sums up the whole idea of Lis Pendens, and I quote, "It would plainly be impossible that any action or suit could be brought to a successful termination if alienations pendente lite were permitted to prevail."
Okay, hold on. Alienations pendente lite. What does that even mean?
It just means transfers made during litigation. So basically, what Justice Turner was saying is that if people could just go around transferring property while a lawsuit was happening, the court wouldn't be able to do its job.
Right, it'd be chaos. No point in having a trial if anyone could just sell the thing and bypass the judgment.
Exactly. That's why Bellamy v. Sabine was so important. It established this principle that the court's authority matters in these property disputes.
So thanks to this 1857 case, we've got this protection in place. But are there, like, ever exceptions to the rule?
You're right, nothing in law is completely absolute. There are a few specific scenarios where Lis Pendens doesn't apply. For instance, let's say a court has already made its final decision, and the transfer is just part of carrying out that order.
Right.
It's basically just wrapping things up.
Okay, so the court's already decided, and the transfer is just putting that into action.
Exactly. Lis Pendens wouldn't really matter there because the transfer is not being contested, It's just following the court's ruling.
Got it. What other exceptions are there?
Well, another one would be if the property, if it isn't really defined, like clearly identifiable, remember that direct and specific thing?
Uh-huh.
If the property description is vague or unclear, then Lis Pendens, it might not apply. And of course, if the lawsuit itself, if it turns out to be bogus.
Bogus, like a fake lawsuit.
Yeah, like fraudulent or something.
Because the whole point is there has to be a real dispute.
Exactly. No funny business. So yeah, Lis Pendens, it has its limits, but it's still a pretty powerful tool, to protect property rights during a case.
For sure. Now, I want to go back to something we mentioned before, that doctrine of part performance.
Oh, yeah. Section 53A of the Transfer of Property Act, it kind of adds another layer of protection for buyers.
Well, you said it's like a safety net.
Yeah, think of it like this. You agree to buy a property, right? You've
Right.
got a written agreement, paid some of the price, maybe you've even started fixing the place up. But then something happens. The official registration of the sale, it gets delayed.
Okay, so I'm living there doing my part of the deal, but the paperwork's lagging behind.
Exactly. Now, the seller, well, they might see that delay and think, hey, I can kick this buyer out, even though the buyer's doing everything right.
Wow, really?
Yeah, just because that registration isn't complete. But that's where Section 53A comes in, the Doctrine of Part Performance. It basically says, nope, if the buyer's acting in good faith, they've held up their end of the bargain and they're already on the property.
Then the seller can't just evict them.
You got it. It's about being fair. Recognizing that, equity matters in property law, too, not just following the letter of the law.
I like that. It shows that the law, it's not always just rigid rules. It tries to do what's right.
For sure. Now, one more doctrine to throw into the mix, the Doctrine of Election.
Right, hit me with it. You said it has something to do with choices.
Yeah, the basic idea is you can't have your cake and eat it, too. You can't accept the good parts of a deal and then just reject the parts you don't like. Section 35 of the Transfer of Property Act, that's where this comes in.
So I can't just pick and choose what I want from a deal.
Exactly. Let's say someone tries to sell you a property, right? But it turns out they didn't actually have the right to sell it. But as part of that same deal, they also give you this valuable painting, which they do own.
Okay, so maybe I'm getting a bad land deal, but I get a nice painting out of it.
Hold on. That's where the Doctrine of Election comes in. You, the buyer, you've got a choice. You can take the land, even though the title's messed up, and you get to keep the painting.
Okay.
Or you can say, no deal. Reject the whole thing and you give up both the land and the painting. You can't pick and choose.
So it's all or nothing.
Yep, like a package deal. You take the whole package or you walk away.
But why would anyone ever accept a bad land deal, even if they got a painting with it?
Good question. Sometimes that painting might be so valuable, it outweighs the risk of the land title. Or maybe the buyer thinks they can fix the land title later on.
Right.
It really depends on the situation.
That's interesting. It adds a whole strategic element to property transactions.
It does. It means you've got to think carefully about the whole deal, weigh the pros and cons, and understand what your choices might mean down the road.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground here. The Doctrine of Priority, Lis Pendens, part performance, and even the Doctrine of Election. It's pretty amazing how much complexity there is in property law.
It is. And it's really cool. how these different doctrines, they're all connected. Remember how we talked about exceptions to that first in time, first in right rule?
Uh-huh.
Well, Lis Pendens, it can actually override that whole principle
Wait,
sometimes.
so even if someone got their interest in the property first, a lawsuit could change everything.
Exactly. Let's say someone gets a mortgage on a property. Later, there's dispute about who owns the property, and while that lawsuit's going on, the owner tries to sell the property.
Oh.
Even though the mortgage happened first, before the lawsuit, Lis Pendens, it puts everything on hold until that ownership issue is settled.
So the lawsuit could totally invalidate the sale, even though the buyer might have thought everything was legit.
Exactly. Lis Pendens, it's like throwing a wrench in the whole machinery. It makes it really risky to buy a property when there's a lawsuit going on.
Wow, that's a powerful example of how Lis Pendens can really change the game. It makes you realize how important it is to do your homework before buying property.
Totally. Buyers need to know about these legal risks, do their research, make sure they're not stepping into a legal nightmare.
That's why we do these deep dives. We're peeling back the layers of the law, showing how complex these seemingly simple transactions can be. But are there, like, any Indian cases that really show this interplay between the Doctrine of Priority and Lis Pendens?
Oh, there are a bunch. One that comes to mind is Kachi Properties versus Gampatrao Shankarao. Bombay High Court decided that one back in 2010.
Okay, what happened in that case?
So a family, they were fighting over a property, a petition suit, and while the lawsuit's going on, one of them decides to sell the property.
To someone else?
Right, a third party, a classic Lis Pendens situation.
Did the court let the sale go through?
Nope. The Bombay High Court, they basically said, no way. They upheld the Lis Pendens doctrine, reminding everyone, hey, this is here to prevent people from transferring property that's being disputed in court. It's about protecting everyone's rights and making sure the court can do its job.
So even though the sale might have looked okay on paper, the court saw it as a problem because it could have messed up the whole partition case.
Exactly. The Kachi Properties case, it shows how Indian courts are using these doctrines in real life to keep things fair and make sure the legal system works properly.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that you can't just ignore a lawsuit and sell a property like nothing's happening.
And it's a cautionary tale for buyers, Not
Yeah.
knowing about these doctrines, it can cost you big time.
That's why we're here, right? LexTalks is all about demystifying the law, giving you the knowledge you need to make smart decisions and protect yourself.
Totally. Understanding these concepts, it's not just about passing an exam, it's about knowing how to use the law to your advantage.
All right, let's do a quick recap. Today we talked about the Doctrine of Priority, that first come, first served principle. Then we went into Lis Pendens and how a lawsuit can put a hold on property transfers. We even talked about the doctrine of part performance and how it protects buyers who already started fulfilling their part of the deal. And then we tackled the doctrine of election, where you have to choose all or nothing.
We also looked at how these doctrines all connect, used real examples, cases like Kachi Properties, to show how they play out in the real world.
This has been a pretty intense deep dive into Indian property law.
It has. And remember, these concepts, they're important for anyone who deals with property.
Not just lawyers.
Right, buyers, sellers, everyone.
Now, before we go, I want to leave you with a little something to think about. Imagine you're about to buy a property.
A big purchase, right?
Could be a house, some land, whatever. Knowing what you know now, with the Doctrine of Priority, Lis Pendens,
Right.
what steps would you take to make sure you're not buying something with a ton of legal problems attached?
That's a great question. It shows how important it is to actually use this stuff in real life, not just in a textbook.
Right.
I'd say, number one, do your research.
Due diligence, as they say.
Exactly. Look into the property's history. See if there have been any disputes, any lawsuits.
Maybe even talk to a lawyer.
Couldn't hurt. It's better to be safe than sorry, right? A little effort up front can save you a lot of trouble down the line.
Totally agree. Understanding all this legal stuff, it's not just about passing exams. It's about being smart, protecting yourself.
Exactly. Knowing your rights, it's powerful.
Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into the Doctrine of Priority and transfer of Lis Pendens.
It does. It's been a journey.
Big thank you to our expert for walking us through all this.
Happy to be here. Always enjoy talking about property law.
And to all our listeners, remember to subscribe to LexTalks. We're here every week breaking down legal concepts, making the law a little less mysterious.
Keep those legal minds sharp. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for being part of LexTalks. Subscribe and never miss an episode.